Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is December 1st, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So remember yesterday, guys, I talked about this train explosion that happened in one of the tunnels within Siberia in Russia, which was a Ukrainian security service operation, which went successfully. And now we have another update, an excellent update that because of that explosion that occurred in this tunnel, basically the Russians, to continue the movement, had to use a detour that passed through this so-called Devil's Bridge. Really, it holds its name right. So this is what exactly the Ukrainian security services were counting on. And so when that train passed over this 35-meter high bridge, the explosive device embedded in it went off. And you can see that this is a screenshot of the aftermath. So this is a small forest right beside the railway line, which completely burned off. And you could see also a lot of fuel tankers destroyed. So this is a brilliant operation by Ukraine security services. Again, it showcases how deep Ukraine can operate in Russia. And I really hope that this can turn into a weekly event. Ukraine needs to multiply these types of efforts within Russia to really stop their war effort. We know that Russia exclusively relies on rail for its logistics, and by stopping and destroying as many of these key connections within Russia, it's really going to help the Ukrainians win this war quicker. So that is excellent. Now, let's talk about electronic warfare systems. So this article indicates that the Ukrainian military is adopting new electronic warfare systems, and they have successfully tested tactical radio jamming equipment that have been developed by Ukrainian enterprises to counter the loitering munition and FPV drones. It's good to see that Ukraine is taking this very seriously. Unfortunately, Russia has better development in this sphere, and we've seen the Russians heavily utilize electronic warfare systems, especially since spring, summer of this year. And it's good to see that Ukraine also understands the importance of these types of systems and now is starting to catch up, because the Russians are also mass producing their own drones, and they're also being very effective against Ukrainians. So it's good to see that Ukraine has now started adopting new EW systems and will mass produce them eventually. So this is excellent. You can see that Ukraine has already created one of these, which is called ITER. So this is a system that helps the military detect electronic warfare systems, enemy electronic warfare systems, and launch drones on a safe route. In addition, this ITER system can also help counter the EW systems, effectively detect enemy positions and also the location of artillery and inflict target effects. So I can only hope that Ukraine can start mass producing them and really stopping the Russians as well with their long-range drone attacks against the Ukrainians. And speaking of Russian drone attacks, the Russians were very proud yesterday because they showcased a video of one of their Lancet, their newest Lancet prototype drones, hitting again the Ukrainian airfield in Kryvyi Rih. And unfortunately, in the past, the Russians have been successful at destroying a MiG-29 in this airfield and another Su-25 a few months ago. So the Ukrainians thankfully have learned from these mistakes and have started building decoys. Now, this has really been it's been proved by Forbes that this is most likely a decoy that the Russians managed to destroy yesterday. And it really indicates the level of basically how well Ukraine can build these decoys now. And you can see that the reason being that they believe this was a decoy is because the Su-25 wings don't blend with the fuselage mounted inlets, so these low inlets here. So it appears to be a very good decoy by Ukraine. And again, with what I said previously, with good electronic warfare systems to stop these, so they can jam Russian drones, hopefully this can reduce the amount of Russian drone attacks on Ukrainian positions, and especially airfields, which will eventually also have F-16s. And I don't think the Ukrainians will be putting these F-16s in Kryvyi Rih. They will probably be used much further away from the front line because of just how precious F-16s are going to be in a few months when Ukraine is going to start flying them. So this is good news. The Russians destroyed decoy in Kryvyi Rih. And lastly, I want to talk about, actually, yeah, I want to talk about the Russians, and this is an unfortunate piece of news, but we need to talk about the reality of this war, which is also in the form of ethnic cleansing in Russian-occupied territories in Donbass, and most likely in Zaporizhia and Kherson as well. So Russia has imported over 100,000 Asian migrants to Donbass, and they plan to create a cross-border commonwealth. So the Kremlin is trying to change the demographics in the occupied territories, not surprising, to replace the indigenous Ukrainian population, and by doing that, they plan to merge Ukrainian and Russian regions to create this commonwealth. And according to the Center for National Resistance, CNR, the total number of migrants from Asia has already exceeded 100,000 people. Most of them work in construction, and you guys, I can bet that most of these construction projects are just fortifying Russian positions in Donbass, right? Building these trenches, these bunkers. Very little is actually being invested to rebuild Donbass. It's just turning it into another fortress for the Russians. But in the future, the Russians plan to mobilize them in exchange for citizenship, another disgusting tactic by Russia. The Ukrainian underground also says that such a massive influx of migrants has already provoked a deterioration in the crime situation in the occupied regions and led to the creation of ethnic criminal groups. Evidently, you bring 100,000 people in less than a few months, this is what's going to happen. Complete chaos, especially because Russia doesn't have any of the institutions and systems in place to control these people. So you're going to have a lot of chaos and crime, unfortunately. And this is exactly a Russian tactic that's been employed in Ukraine for centuries. For centuries. The Russians are ethnically cleansing the Ukrainians, moving either its own people or other types of migrants in these territories, and then Russifying these territories. How do you think the Donbass proxy war in early 2014 happened? It's exactly through these tactics that, through generation to generation, then create a pro-Russian population. And unfortunately, this is what happened in Donbass, right? A lot of these people were misled and lied to by Russia, but because, and I think it was a direct result of the Holodomor, which was a genocide committed by Stalin against the Ukrainians to kill as many Ukrainian people as possible through famine, an artificial famine, because he saw them as a threat, as a rebellious nation that would always be problematic for the Soviet regime. And this is not just purely from Soviet times. This is also from the Russian Empire, where the Russian Empire tried to colonize the Ukrainians, impose Russian language, impose, the Russian Ruski Mir on the Ukrainians. And this is what we're seeing now. This is no different from what we've been seeing 200 years ago, 50 years ago. Russia continues with the same colonizing plans. And another example, recent example, Russia utilizing LPR and DPR forces against its own people, right? These are Ukrainian people that are pro-Russian, but they're killing their own Ukrainian people, right? And Russia's really done a good job at doing these types of manipulations. But this is another reason why Russia must be stopped, right? They will continue on doing that. This was their plan all along. Had Russia taken Kiev in that 3 days or 1 week, it doesn't matter, destroyed those, the Ukrainian government, they would have started doing that all over Ukraine, right? They would be doing the exact same tactic, imposing Russian language, sending people to their own, concentration camps, killing off the ones that they don't like, and it would have been a massive bloodshed in Ukraine. This is why the Ukrainians are fighting against Russia, because they know this is what's going to happen if they lose. And so I hope that many of these countries that somehow are forcing Ukraine to sue for peace realize that and really start doing as much as possible to help the Ukrainians win this, right? I think it's extremely important. So let me know what you guys think about this last article. I'm curious to hear your opinions. Again, huge thank you for support, not only for my channel, but for the Ukrainian cause. And if you enjoy my content, like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini!